The air in the Echoil colony didn't smell like air. It smelled like recycled oxygen scrubbed too clean, like metal that had been polished until it forgot it was metal. Even the wind felt controlled, soft, careful, almost polite. The kind of breeze you'd expect in a hospital, not on a settlement built on a hostile rock floating at the edge of civilized space. I stood in the middle of my new living room with 3 unopened crates stacked like tombstones. My whole life fit inside them. Tools, clothes, a worn salvage helmet I'd promised myself I'd never wear again, and a framed photo of a ship I'd once called home, now dead and drifting somewhere far beyond any map worth following. The house was small, colony-issued, and aggressively average. 1 story, thin walls, a kitchen that looked like it was designed by someone who hated cooking, a front door made of heavy steel, with a locking mechanism that felt stronger than the entire rest of the building. It didn't match. Nothing about it matched. Like someone had taken a bunker door and bolted it onto a civilian rental unit. I moved here because I wanted quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get in deep space. The terrifying, endless kind that makes you hear your own heartbeat and wonder how long it can keep going. No, I wanted a different quiet. A simple quiet. The kind where you can sleep without alarms, without decompression drills, without waking up to the sound of something trying to kill you. That was what the contract promised. Foreign species liaison, structural integrity monitoring, noble quarter perimeter oversight, all bureaucratic words that meant, keep your head down, do your job, and enjoy the paycheck. The pay was good enough to retire on. And after 20 years in salvage, pulling scrap from dead cruisers, crawling through wreckage that still smelled like burned wiring and regret, I'd earned retirement. I'd earned a door that closed, a bed that didn't shake, a life that didn't demand I gamble it every morning just to eat. But the moment I stepped into Echoil, I realized the colony didn't feel peaceful. Felt restrained. The streets were too clean. The buildings were tall gray slabs of brutalist concrete, softened by floating holograms of cherry blossoms and koi fish made of light. Decorative distractions. Pretty mask over something cold. Even the people moved quietly, like they were afraid sound might break something important. When I carried my crates inside, my neighbors didn't greet me. They watched from behind their windows, not with curiosity, not with friendliness, with the kind of nervous stillness I'd seen on ships right before a reactor breach. Eyes wide, bodies frozen, like they were waiting for something to go wrong. I told myself it was nothing. New guy paranoia, culture differences, colony etiquette. Still, as the door sealed behind me with a heavy hiss, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't moved into a quiet colony. I'd moved into a place that was holding its breath. That first night I didn't unpack. I told myself I would, but the colony had a way of draining energy out of you without ever raising its voice. By the time the artificial twilight dimmed into full dome night, my muscles felt heavy, like gravity had quietly doubled while I wasn't looking. I ate half a protein bar, drank a cup of lukewarm water, and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the steel front door. It was stupid. A door was a door, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The thickness, the seals, the way the locking bolts slid into place with a sound that felt more military than civilian. Like it wasn't designed to keep people out, but to keep something in. I finally forced myself to lie down, and that was when the first chime sounded. Soft, polite, almost gentle. A notification from the external camera feed. Motion detected. I blinked, half asleep, and reached for the wall console beside the bed. The screen flickered to life with that low-refresh civilian housing quality. For a second, I thought it was glitching. The image was dark, grainy, and still. Then I saw them. 3 figures stood on the walkway outside my unit. They weren't moving, not shifting weight, not looking around, just standing there in perfect formation like a ceremonial guard posted outside a vault. My first thought was security. My second thought was cult. Then the camera adjusted exposure, and the colony lights painted them in pale silver. Women, tall, pale, too still, not human still, not waiting for a bus still, more like statues carved out of moonlight and shadow. I sat up slowly, suddenly wide awake. They were beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. The kind of beauty that makes your instincts whisper warnings even while your eyes want to stare. The one in the center stood slightly forward, like the axis everything else rotated around. Her skin was so pale it looked almost translucent beneath the dome lights. She wore white robes heavy with silver embroidery, and the fabric didn't hang like normal cloth. It floated, as if the air itself didn't want to touch her. Her eyes were closed, not sleeping, not resting, listening, like she could hear something no one else could. To her right stood a woman in dark armor. Not bulky military plating, something flexible and lethal, fitted like it was made to move fast and strike faster. Her posture was rigid, shoulders squared, arms crossed, like she was daring the universe to give her an excuse. She looked directly at my door. Not the camera, not the street, the door. To the left was the third woman, younger, or at least she acted younger. She leaned against the railing with casual arrogance, inspecting her fingernails like she was bored. But every few seconds, her gaze flicked to the door too, like she couldn't help herself. I stared at the screen so long my eyes started to sting. Then I checked the colony clock. 23:17. Who stands outside someone's home at that hour? I pulled up the colony resident directory. No alerts, no crime reports, no security warnings, nothing, just silence. Manufactured, perfect silence. I zoomed the camera in. The central woman's face filled the screen, and my breath caught. Her features were too symmetrical, too perfect. Not in a cosmetic way, in a genetic way, like she wasn't born. She was designed. And even through the cheap camera feed, there was something in her expression that made my skin prickle. Sadness. Deep. Ancient. The kind that doesn't come from losing a battle. The kind that comes from living inside a cage for too long. A line from the briefing packet surfaced in my memory, one I'd skimmed and dismissed like useless trivia. The Vire Court. Exiled nobility. Bioelectric physiology. Avoid physical contact. I remembered the rumors too. Every colony had rumors. Ecoils were just quieter. They said the Vire women were cursed, that their blood carried lightning, that if you touched the Empress your heart would stop before you could scream, that their beauty wasn't a gift, it was bait, a trap. They called them vampire women because people always need a monster they can understand. I swallowed, throat dry. Outside, the three women remained perfectly still. Not guarding the street, not patrolling, guarding my door. I tried to convince myself they were in the wrong place. That maybe this was a neighbor issue, some diplomatic ceremony, some misplaced royal nonsense. Then the younger one tilted her head slightly and looked straight into the camera lens. Straight at me. A slow smile curved her lips, like she'd been waiting for me to notice. And that was the moment I understood something cold and heavy in my chest. They knew I was watching, and they weren't here by accident. For a full minute, I just sat there staring at the monitor, waiting for my brain to supply a rational explanation. Maybe they were lost. Maybe this was some kind of colony security drill. Maybe the camera feed was delayed and I was watching footage from another night. But the younger one's smile didn't fade. She kept looking straight into the lens like she knew exactly where I was sitting, what I was thinking, and how quickly my pulse was climbing. I exhaled through my nose, slow and controlled. I'd survived pirates, corporate hit squads, decompression alarms that went off at 3 in the morning because someone forgot to seal a hatch. I wasn't about to let 3 women standing on my porch scare me back into bed. I got up. The floor was cold under my feet, and the apartment felt too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, listening quiet. The kind of quiet you get in a shipwreck right before something collapses. I grabbed my hydro spanner out of habit, because in salvage you never walk into unknown territory empty-handed. Then I paused and stared at the tool in my grip. What was I going to do? Fix them? I set it down and walked to the door instead. The locking mechanism blinked green, waiting for my thumbprint. I hesitated. My instincts, honed by 20 years of surviving bad decisions, were screaming that opening that door was a mistake. Not because they'd attack me, because I wasn't sure I'd like what I learned. Still, I pressed my thumb to the panel. The bolts retracted with a heavy clunk, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The reaction outside was immediate. The armored woman moved first. Her hand dropped to the hilt of a shock baton at her hip, and her posture shifted from stillness to readiness in one smooth motion. Like a predator waking up. Like she'd been waiting for permission to bite. The younger one straightened, eyes bright with amusement. And the woman in white, the one in the center, opened her eyes. Her irises were luminous violet. Not contact lenses. Not lighting tricks. Real. The kind of color that doesn't exist in nature unless nature is trying to warn you. The air between us tightened. Static prickled over my skin, lifting the fine hairs on my arms. It wasn't strong enough to hurt, but it was enough to remind me of the briefing packet's most important line. Do not touch the wire. Good evening, I said, keeping my voice calm, neutral. The way you talk to a loaded weapon you don't want to fire. Can I help you? The armored woman stepped forward half a pace, blocking the center woman like a shield. Her gaze was cold enough to freeze helium. Go back inside, human, she said. Her voice had a strange resonance, like two tones layered together. It vibrated in my chest more than it reached my ears. This does not concern you. I blinked once. Then I gestured at the porch beneath their feet. It's my porch, I said. So technically, it concerns me a little. The younger one snorted, then quickly covered her mouth when the armored woman shot her a glare. I didn't miss it. The dynamic. Center woman. Silent authority. Armored woman. Control and violence. Younger one. Curiosity barely restrained. The woman in white finally spoke. Her voice was softer than I expected, like wind chimes in a storm. We are waiting, she said. Waiting. Not hiding. Not spying. Waiting. For what? I asked. The armored woman answered before the Empress could. The Senate summoned us, she said. We are to attend the reaffirmation ceremony. The escort is late. I looked past them at the empty street. No patrol. No drones. No official transport. Just the colony's artificial night and the hum of distant infrastructure. And you decided to wait here? I said slowly. Outside my door. The younger one's lips twitched again. She leaned closer, like she was about to share a secret. The resonance is better here, she said. The armored woman snapped her head toward her. Silence, Iris. The younger woman, Iris, rolled her eyes but shut her mouth. I filed the word away like a tool in my belt. Resonance. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew it mattered. Because nothing about this colony felt random. Not the quiet. Not the fear in the neighbor's eyes. Not the bunker door on a civilian unit. And definitely not the fact that 3 vampire women, one of them royalty, were standing guard like my home was the most valuable thing on the street. I opened my mouth to demand an explanation. But before I could speak, a melodic chime echoed across the neighborhood. The public announcement system. The voice that followed was smooth, synthetic, and completely without emotion. Citizen Rook, it said. Your presence is requested at the Grand Hall. You are to accompany the imperial guest to the reaffirmation ceremony. Attendance is mandatory. I stared at the speaker drone hovering near the street lamp. Then I looked back at the 3 women. The armored one's expression hardened, like she'd just been handed a knife and told to use it. The Empress didn't react at all, but her violet eyes locked onto mine. And in that gaze, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Relief, like the trap had finally closed. I swallowed. Well, I muttered, forcing a thin smile. Looks like I'm the escort. For a moment, none of us moved. The speaker drone hovered in place like a smug insect, its little red indicator light blinking as if it enjoyed being the messenger. The message repeated once more. Same calm tone, same threat buried in polite wording. Mandatory attendance. Credit deduction. Visa revocation. The colony didn't ask you to do things. It reminded you who owned the air you breathed. I looked from the drone to the 3 women still standing on my porch like they'd been carved into it. The armored one, Sable, was staring at me with open disgust, as if the Senate had just assigned a stray dog to escort a queen. You, she said, voice low and sharp. You have no armor. No weapon. You are barely insulated. I shrugged like I wasn't suddenly a piece on a board I didn't understand. I've got a suit, I said. Give me 5 minutes. Sable's jaw tightened, but she didn't stop me. She couldn't. The order had come from the system itself. From the colony's voice. From whatever invisible machine ran echoill like a clock. I stepped back inside and the door sealed behind me. The apartment felt different now. Not safe. Just temporary. Like the walls had already decided they wouldn't be mine for long. I moved fast. 20 years of salvage didn't teach you elegance, but it taught you speed. I crossed the living room, yanked open the nearest crate, and tossed packing foam aside until my hands hit familiar metal. My salvage rig. Matte gray exosuit plating. Scuffed. Scarred. Burn marks from plasma storms and micrometeor impacts. A road map of every bad decision that hadn't killed me. I ran my fingers over the chest plate for half a second, like touching the past. Then I started strapping in. The suit wasn't heavy lift anymore. I'd removed the big servos years ago when I quit deep salvage. But the insulation was still top grade, layered with kinetic dampeners and thermal shielding. If you worked around fusion cores and broken hulls, you learned one thing fast. If you can't stop the danger, at least don't conduct it. I clipped my diagnostic gauntlet onto my left forearm. The tool housing lit up with a soft blue glow. Voltage meters. Spectral analyzers. EM scanners. Not weapons, just the kind of equipment that kept you alive when the universe tried to fry you. I grabbed my helmet, then stopped. No, helmet would make me look like security. And if there was one thing I'd learned about power structures, it was this. When you show up looking like you belong, people assume you're part of the problem. So I clipped it to my belt instead and walked back to the door. The porch camera feed still showed them in position. The Empress in the center, eyes closed again. Sable scanning the street like she was already expecting an ambush. Iris leaning casually, but watching the door frame like it might whisper secrets. I opened the door. They all looked at me. For the first time, Sable's expression changed. Not softer, not friendly, just surprised. Because the salvage rig didn't make me look like a bureaucrat. It made me look like someone who had crawled out of places you weren't supposed to survive. Ready? I said, rolling my shoulder as the suit lock sealed. Let's go. Iris grinned. Oh, she said. He's not dull. Sable ignored her. The Empress opened her eyes again, violet and unreadable. She didn't speak, but something in her posture shifted. Subtle. Like she was accepting that the colony had chosen its escort and she didn't have the luxury of refusing. She stepped forward. The air shimmered faintly around her, like heat distortion. Like her body carried a storm under the skin. I took a careful half-step back, maintaining distance. I wasn't scared of her. Not exactly, but I respected electricity. We moved off my porch and onto the silent street. The colony lights flickered overhead, soft and artificial, casting long shadows behind us. No one came out to watch. No neighbors opened doors. Curtains stayed shut. Yet I could feel eyes on us from behind glass. Fearful eyes. Not of me, of her. As we walked toward the grand hall, Echoill stayed quiet. So quiet it felt like the whole colony was holding its breath, waiting for something to finally snap. And I had the sinking feeling that, by the time the night ended, it would. Echoill streets were wide, clean, and empty in the way a graveyard is empty. Maintained, intentional, and full of things that didn't want to be disturbed. As we walked, the colony tried to pretend nothing unusual was happening. Holographic koi fish swam through the air above the sidewalks, flickering lazily between the street lamps. Digital cherry blossoms drifted down in endless loops, dissolving before they touched the ground. A perfect illusion of peace. But the people behind the windows didn't look peaceful. They didn't wave. They didn't whisper. They didn't even let their faces show too long. I saw silhouettes pull back from curtains, like watching the Empress was dangerous even through glass. The Vire women moved like they belonged to a different gravity. Sable walked point, scanning every angle with the precision of someone who had fought more battles than she had spoken words. Iris kept drifting from side to side, playful on the surface, but always circling back into formation like an orbiting blade. And the Empress, Selena, walked in the center, silent and steady, her robes gliding over the pavement without sound. I stayed 2 meters away, just like the briefing said. Do not touch. It wasn't just a warning. It was law. It was religion. It was fear packaged as protocol. The Grand Hall rose at the heart of the colony like a monument to control. A black structure of stone and reinforced polymer, taller than anything around it, its edges sharp and clean. The kind of building that didn't invite you inside, it demanded you enter and behave. At the entrance, Senate guards stood in perfect rows, pulse rifles held at ceremonial angles. Their white uniforms were spotless. Their helmets were polished. Their faces were blank. Not disciplined, programmed. As Selena approached, the guards stiffened. They didn't bow. They didn't greet her. They just watched her like she was a live reactor core being wheeled past their boots. I felt it then, something I hadn't fully understood until that moment. This wasn't a ceremony. It was a cage inspection. The doors groaned open, and warm air rolled out like a breath from a sleeping beast. It smelled sweet at first. Incense, heavy and cloying, but underneath it was something sharper, metallic, sterile, like ventilation systems working overtime to keep a room full of power from suffocating itself. Inside, the Grand Hall was enormous. Cathedral built for bureaucracy, black marble floors, high ceilings lined with golden latticework, floating chandeliers that cast soft, flattering light over the room like the colony wanted everything to look beautiful even while it threatened to kill you. Hundreds of people filled the space. Senate officials in crimson robes and white uniforms. Wealthy merchants wrapped in expensive fabrics. Human elites with faces trained into polite expressions. And scattered among them, small clusters of Vire nobility standing apart, silent and tense, like wolves surrounded by hunters. When Selena stepped through the entrance, the room didn't just quiet down. It froze. Not the respectful silence you give a queen. The fearful silence you give a weapon. I watched people lower their eyes. Some stepped back instinctively. A few pressed their palms to their chests like they were praying she wouldn't notice them. Selena didn't react. She walked forward with her head high, violet eyes fixed ahead, as if she'd been forced to walk this path 1,000 times and refused to flinch on the 1,001st. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, sat Chancellor Ormond Sear. The moment I saw him, I didn't like him. Not because he looked evil. Because he looked manufactured. Perfect silver hair. Perfect tan. Perfect posture. A smile shaped like something designed by a committee. He wore crimson robes with high collars and gold trim, and he watched Selena the way a collector watches a rare insect pinned under glass. When the herald stepped forward, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics, it echoed like a verdict. Her Imperial Highness, Empress Selena Ares. No applause, no cheers, just that suffocating silence again. Selena reached the base of the dais and stopped. She didn't bow. That alone sent a ripple through the crowd. Tiny, nervous shifts. A few gasps swallowed quickly. Ormond smiled wider. Your Highness, he said smoothly, voice warm enough to sound kind. We are honored. Tonight we reaffirm the treaty. The peace between the Senate and the Vire. The order that keeps Echoil stable. He gestured broadly, like the hall was his stage and everyone inside was his audience. The chaos of the void threatens all civilization, he continued. But here we have safety, structure, silence, silence. The word landed heavy, because now I knew this colony didn't treat silence as comfort. Treated silence as obedience. Ormond lifted a hand and snapped his fingers once. A servant stepped forward, young human male, shaking hands, eyes fixed on the floor. He carried a golden tray like it weighed more than metal, like it carried consequences. On the tray sat a single ornate chalice, gold, engraved with symbols I didn't recognize. The liquid inside was deep violet, almost black, shimmering under the lights. Ormond's voice grew ceremonial. The Sacrament of Unity, he announced. A blend of rare nectars, symbolizing the sweetness of our cooperation. The servant held the chalice out towards Selena, and I watched her hesitate, just a fraction. But enough. Enough for me to see the tension in her jaw, the tightness in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched like she wanted to pull back and couldn't. Sable stiffened beside her, hand drifting near her baton. Iris stopped smiling. Even the Vyre nobles shifted uneasily. Something about that chalice was wrong. And my salvage instincts, those old instincts that had kept me alive in broken ships, whispered the same warning they always did right before disaster. This is a trap. Selena's hand lifted slowly toward the cup, and without thinking I activated my gauntlet scanner. The HUD flickered across my vision, locking onto the chalice. Lines of data began to scroll. Chemical signatures, spectral breakdown, toxicity indicators. My blood went cold, because I recognized the profile. Not from medicine, from pest control. Industrial neuroinhibitors designed to shut down nervous systems. For humans, it would cause sickness. For a Vyre physiology, bioelectric, electrolyte-dependent, it would be an execution. Selena's fingers brushed the gold stem. The crowd held its breath, and I realized I had about 1 second to decide what kind of person I was going to be in this colony. A quiet man who minded his business, or the idiot who kicked over the first domino. Selena's fingers tightened around the stem of the chalice. The servant's hands shook so badly I could see the tremor even from where I stood. His knuckles were white. His eyes were fixed on the floor like he was afraid that if he looked up, he'd be punished for witnessing whatever was about to happen. And the crowd wasn't watching a queen take a ceremonial drink. They were watching a condemned prisoner step onto a trapdoor. My scanner's readout kept flashing red warnings across my contact lens. Cytotoxin 7. Neuroinhibitor chain. Electrolyte precipitation. Lethal in Vyre physiology. I didn't think. I didn't weigh the consequences. I didn't consider the fact that I was a foreign liaison in a colony that punished people for breathing wrong. I just stepped forward. Don't. The word came out flat and hard, like a command you give right before a hull breach. The entire grand hall seemed to inhale at once. Selena froze, her hand still on the chalice. Sable's head snapped toward me like she couldn't believe I'd spoken. Iris's eyes widened, suddenly alert, suddenly serious. Chancellor Ormond Sear turned his head slowly, like I was an insect that had dared crawl onto his table. "Excuse me," he said, voice smooth as oil. "Citizen Rook, you are out of order." I didn't answer him. I stared at the chalice, then at Selena, then at the servant because for a second, I saw it in the boy's face. Not malice, terror. He didn't want to do this. He was being used like a tool. My jaw tightened. "The drink is poisoned," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. A murmur rolled through the crowd like a wave hitting stone. Ormond's smile didn't falter. Not at first. He leaned forward slightly, as if he was humoring a child. "That is a serious accusation," he said. "Perhaps the stress of your new assignment has caused confusion." I lifted my gauntlet and tapped the projection command. A holographic panel flared into existence above the tray, glowing bright blue against the dark marble. Data lines scrolled rapidly, then locked into a toxicology report with jagged red spikes. I pointed at the highlighted chemical chain. "Cytotoxin 7, I said. "High concentration. Industrial grade." The servant flinched like he'd been struck. The crowd's murmur sharpened into whispers. Ormond's eyes narrowed. I kept going. "It's not lethal to humans," I said. "It'll give you stomach pain, nausea, maybe organ irritation. But for a Vyre, whose blood chemistry relies on high-conductivity electrolytes, this doesn't just poison her." I looked directly at Selena. "It crystallizes her blood." Silence. A different silence now. Not fear. Shock. Selena's fingers loosened. The chalice trembled in the servant's hands. Sable's expression turned murderous. Iris's mouth fell open slightly, like she was watching the world rewrite itself in real time. Ormond stood slowly. The air around him shifted. Not because he was physically dangerous, because power was dangerous. And he had a lot of it. He didn't deny it. That was what terrified me. He didn't say it was a mistake. He didn't blame the servant. He didn't act confused. Instead, his face hardened into righteous fury with the speed of a man who had practiced this moment 1,000 times. "See!" Ormond shouted, voice booming through the hall. "See how she corrupts everything she touches." He pointed at Selena, his fingers shaking with theatrical outrage. "The Empress is unstable. Her biofield has tainted the sacrament." A wave of confused panic surged through the crowd. People wanted to believe him. They needed to believe him, because if he was lying, then everything they'd built their safety on was rotten. Ormond continued, seizing the fear like a weapon. "She turns offerings into poison," he roared. "She allows foreign laborers to interfere with Senate protocol. She is compromised." He turned sharply toward the guards lining the walls. "Secure the asset." 50 pulse rifles lifted at once. The hum of charging capacitors filled the air, high-pitched, teeth-rattling, like a swarm of angry insects. Sable drew her shock baton. The tip crackled with blue electricity. Iris slid 2 jagged daggers from beneath her cloak, her playful mask gone completely now. Selena stood still, her face pale, her eyes wide. Not with fear of death, but with something worse. Resignation. Like she'd known all along that this was how her story ended. The servant's hands finally gave out. The golden tray slipped from his grip. The chalice hit the marble floor with a sharp metallic clatter, spilling violet liquid that hissed faintly as it splashed. The sound snapped the room into chaos. Vyre nobles backed away in horror. Human elites gasped and stumbled. Senate officials shouted conflicting orders. Ormond raised his arms like a conductor controlling panic. "Order!" he bellowed. "Silence is survival." The guards stepped forward. Pulse rifles aimed at Selena's chest. At my chest. At Sable. At Iris. I realized then, the chalice wasn't the only trap. It was just the opening move. Because Ormond wasn't reacting like a man whose assassination attempt had been exposed. He was reacting like a man who had been waiting for an excuse to do something much bigger. Sable's voice cut through the noise, low and lethal. "Human," she hissed without looking at me. "You have doomed us." I swallowed, heart hammering. "Maybe," I said. Then I looked at Ormond Seer, at the smug certainty in his eyes. And I knew one thing with absolute clarity. He hadn't expected me to notice. But now that I had, he couldn't allow any of us to leave this room alive. The first shot didn't come from a rifle. It came from the building itself. A sharp metallic click, barely audible beneath the chaos, snapped through the air like a warning whisper. My eyes flicked left instinctively, and that was when I saw it. A tiny red light blinking at the base of a massive stone pillar near the dais. Not a camera, not a sensor, a charge. Shaped, directional, built to blow inward. "Trap!" I shouted. But the word was too late. The explosion didn't sound like a bang. It sounded like the universe cracking a whip inside a bell. The pillar shattered. Stone turned into shrapnel. A concussive wave slammed across the grand hall and threw people off their feet like dolls. Glass chandeliers burst overhead, raining glittering fragments. The air filled with dust and screams and the sharp, choking smell of pulverized marble. Selena was closest. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. The blast caught her like she weighed nothing. She lifted off the ground, robes snapping like sails, and flew backward toward the edge of the dais where the marble steps dropped into an ornate water feature below. If she hit the stone, her hollow bones would shatter. If she hit the water while discharging, she would boil herself alive. Sable lunged. Too far. Iris reached. Too late. And my body moved before my mind could argue. I sprinted, boots skidding on spilled liquid and broken glass. I dove toward Selena, arms outstretched. I reached with my left hand first, my gauntlet hand. Missed. Fingers scraped empty air. She was still flying, still falling. So I reached with my right hand. Bare skin. No insulation. No protection. My fingers closed around her wrist. The contact was immediate. Felt like grabbing a live power line. Crack. A sound like lightning striking metal echoed through the hall. Blue-white light exploded outward from the point where our skin touched. It blinded the nearest guards. It shattered what was left of the chandeliers. The smell of ozone flooded the room so hard it burned the inside of my nose. Pain slammed into me. Not pain like a cut. Not pain like a bruise. Pain like being rewritten at the molecular level. Every nerve ending in my body fired at once. My teeth snapped together so hard my jaw screamed. My vision went white. For a split second, I was certain my heart had stopped. That this was it. That I'd made the dumbest heroic decision of my life and paid for it in the most instant way possible. But I didn't let go. I grunted raw animal sound and hauled her back. I used my own momentum to absorb her flight, twisting my body sideways and dragging her out of the air like I was pulling someone away from an open airlock. We hit the floor hard. I took the impact on my back. The world slammed out of me. We skidded across the marble, sliding through dust and shattered glass until my shoulder collided with the base of the Chancellor's podium. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. Selena landed on top of me. Silence fell over the grand hall. Not because the room was calm, because the room was stunned. Everyone stared at us like we were an impossible equation. A human had touched the Empress, and the human wasn't dead. I lay there gasping, lungs refusing to work properly. Smoke curled off my sleeve. My right arm shook uncontrollably, nerves misfiring like damaged wiring. I forced my eyes open. Selena was staring down at me, her face inches from mine. Her violet eyes were wide with terror. Not of the guards, not of the explosion. Of herself. "Don't move," she whispered, voice trembling. "Oh, by the ancestors, do not move." Her hands hovered over my chest like she was afraid touching me again would finish the job. "You're dead," she breathed. "I killed you." I coughed. It hurt like swallowing glass. "Not," I wheezed. "Not quite." I flexed my fingers. They were blackened with soot. Skin angry red. Branching burns crawled across my hand like lightning trapped under flesh. Lichtenberg scars. But my fingers moved. I sucked in a shaky breath and managed the ugliest grin of my life. "Ow," I rasped. "That was spicy." Selena froze. Her expression shifted from horror to disbelief so fast it almost looked like she was glitching. "You live?" she whispered. "I'm insulated." I lied through pain. Because the truth was I had no idea why I wasn't dead. And I've got a high tolerance for bad wiring. Above us, Chancellor Ormond Sear stared like his entire religion had just been shattered. The myth was broken. The fear was cracked. And I saw the moment it hit him. If the colony realized the Empress wasn't untouchable, then she wasn't controllable. Ormond's face twisted. "He is infected," he shrieked, voice cracking with desperation. "He carries the plague. Kill them. Kill them all." The guards snapped out of their shock. Pulse rifles rose again. Sable was already moving, dragging Selena off me. Iris grabbed my harness. "Go!" Sable roared. "Side exit. Service tunnels." "I can't." I tried, but my legs were jelly. "Then drag your feet." Iris snapped. Gunfire erupted. Pulse rounds tore into marble, sending chips of stone exploding around us. We ran, stumbling, dragging, half-carrying each other, into the shadowed archway beneath the gallery. Behind us, the grand hall became a war zone, and ahead of us, the quiet colony finally began to show its teeth. The service door slammed behind us with a heavy clang. For half a second, the sound of the grand hall screams, alarms, the roar of pulse rifles, was muffled into a distant, ugly echo. Then the corridor swallowed us. It was narrow, utilitarian, and dimly lit by emergency strips that flickered like nervous eyelids. Pipes ran along the ceiling, sweating condensation. The air smelled like coolant and rust. It wasn't designed for people. It was designed for maintenance drones and technicians who didn't ask questions. "Perfect." Sable shoved Selena forward with one hand while the other held her shock baton ready. Iris kept her daggers out, glancing back every few steps like she expected guards to burst through the wall itself. And me? I was barely walking. My right arm was screaming. Not pain like a burn. Pain like the inside of my bones had been struck with a hammer. My hand wouldn't stop shaking, fingers twitching uncontrollably, like my nerves were still trying to figure out whether I was alive or dead. Iris hooked her arm under my shoulder and dragged me along like I weighed nothing. "Move, human," she hissed. "I'm moving," I wheezed. "I'm just doing it poorly." A pulse round hit the door behind us with a bright flash, sending sparks skittering across the floor. Sable didn't look back. Faster. We turned hard left into a stairwell and started down. 2 flights. 3. The deeper we went, the louder the colony's heartbeat became. Pipes rattling, fans humming, machinery thudding like something huge was breathing in the walls. Above us, the grand hall alarms howled like wounded animals. And somewhere overhead, Ormond Sear's voice boomed through the PA system, distorted by panic. "Containment breach. Sector 4. Imperial instability. All units respond." Containment. That word again. Not attack. Not assassination attempt. Containment. They weren't hunting criminals. They were trying to seal a leak. We burst into another corridor, this one wider, lined with maintenance panels and junction boxes. Kaido-style infrastructure. The guts of Echo-Ill. The place where the colony hid its real face. I forced myself to focus through the dizziness. Every salvage instinct I had was screaming one thing: find an exit. Find cover. Find a path they don't control. Sable led us through a narrow hatch marked with faded warning symbols. Inside was a tunnel barely wide enough for 2 people shoulder to shoulder. Dark. Quiet. Real quiet. Selena stumbled, and I caught her elbow with my left hand, careful not to touch skin. Even through her robes, static prickled my palm like a warning. Her breathing was ragged. Her face was pale, not from fear, from strain, like holding back the storm inside her was a physical burden. "Are you okay?" I rasped. She didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, barely audible. "They will kill you." I snorted through pain. "They'll have to get in line." Sable snapped her head toward me. "This is not humor." "It's not humor," I said. "It's coping." We reached a junction where 3 tunnels split. Sable stopped dead, scanning. Iris looked impatient. "Left," Iris said quickly. "That one." Sable glared at her. "You don't know." "I do," Iris insisted. "I watched the technicians. This route bypasses the security checkpoints." "How do you know that?" I asked. Iris flashed me a look like I'd asked her favorite color. "Because I get bored standing outside your door every night," she said. "And when I get bored, I listen." That made my stomach tighten. Outside my door every night. Like it was a schedule. Like it was a ritual. We ran again. My legs threatened to fold. But Iris kept hauling me forward with stubborn strength that didn't match her slim frame. Selena moved like she was floating, but her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles showed through the pale skin. Sable was a shadow of violence at the front, every movement sharp and ready. We climbed another stairwell, then another, then a hatch. The air changed as we rose. Less coolant, more recycled oxygen. The hum of the colony surface returned. We were close. We reached a final maintenance door and Sable slammed her palm against the release. It hissed open, and suddenly, we were back in the residential sector. The quiet streets, the fake cherry blossoms, the holographic koi fish swimming through air like nothing had happened. But now the silence felt different. Now it felt predatory. We moved fast, keeping to shadows. No one was outside. No witnesses. Only surveillance drones above, gliding between streetlights like silent hunters. My unit came into view. Unit 419. My door. The same steel door that suddenly didn't feel like an ordinary door at all. Sable shoved me forward. "Open it." I fumbled the lock with my good hand, pulse pounding. The panel flashed green. The door hissed open. We spilled inside, me stumbling, Iris pushing, Sable practically throwing Selena through first like she was protecting her from the air itself. The door slammed shut behind us. Sable immediately engaged every manual lock, slamming bolts into place with brutal force. Then she grabbed my metal shelving unit and dragged it across the floor with a screech that made my teeth hurt. She wedged it against the door like she expected the colony to batter it down. I collapsed onto my couch, clutching my right arm, sweat cold on my spine. Selena stood in the center of my living room, chest heaving, eyes wild. Iris paced like a caged animal. And Sable? Sable stared at the door. Not the windows, not the room, the door frame, like she was guarding it again. Only now, she wasn't guarding it for the colony. She was guarding it from the colony. Outside, the street lights flickered. Drones began to circle. And for the first time since I moved in, the quiet colony started to hum with the sound of hunting. Unit 419 felt smaller with 4 of us inside it. Not because the walls had moved, because the air had changed. The living room was packed with tension. 3 Vire women who moved like weapons, and 1 half-fried salvage tech who could barely keep his right hand from shaking like a faulty cable. I slumped deeper into the couch, biting back a groan as pain pulsed up my arm. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer striking my nerves. Iris hovered nearby, restless, eyes darting between the windows and the door. Sable stood with her back to the steel barrier, shock baton in hand, posture rigid as if she could physically block the colony from entering through sheer will. And Selena stood in the center of my living room like she didn't know where to put herself. Her white robes were stained with soot and dust from the grand hall. The artificial lighting made her look almost ghostly, pale, glowing faintly, too unreal for a cheap rental unit with scratched floors and unpacked crates. Her eyes kept flicking to me, not like a queen watching a subject, like a person watching someone she thought she'd killed. "You should be dead," she whispered suddenly. The words weren't cruel. They were confused, almost afraid. Sable's jaw clenched. Iris stopped pacing. I exhaled through my teeth. "Yeah," I muttered. "So I've been told." Selena stepped closer, then stopped, like she'd hit an invisible wall. Her hands hovered at her sides, trembling slightly, as if her body didn't know what to do when it wasn't being used. "The charge I carry," she said, voice thin. "It attacks the rhythm of the heart. Stops it. It always stops it." She looked at her own palms like they were stained. "I have never touched anyone without hurting them." The room went quiet again. A real quiet, not colony quiet, human quiet. I swallowed, then shifted carefully, wincing. "Then don't touch people," I said. "Problem solved." Iris snorted. Sable shot her a look that could have killed lesser creatures. Before Selena could respond, the chime at my wall console rang. Sharp, urgent. I glanced at the screen. Incoming priority call. Only one person would call me that fast. Only one person would ignore protocol and show up when the colony wanted you silent. I answered. A face appeared, sharp angles, frantic eyes behind old-fashioned spectacles. Dr. Orrin Cade. "Nathan," he blurted. "Your medical file just triggered 3 emergency alerts and—" "What in the void is happening?" "Doc," I rasped. "I need a biogel pack. And whiskey." His eyes widened. "Nathan." "I'm fine," I lied. "Mostly. Come now. And don't bring drones." There was a beat of hesitation. Then Cade's expression hardened with the resigned fury of a man who'd gotten too used to cleaning up other people's disasters. "I'm on my way," he snapped. The call cut. I leaned my head back, letting my eyes close for a second. The pain didn't fade. It just became background noise, like the hum of a ship engine. Minutes later, the door beeped. Manual override. Sable stiffened instantly, baton humming. I raised my left hand. "It's my doctor," I said. "If you fry him, I'm billing you for it." Sable's nostrils flared, but she didn't move. Iris slid the shelving unit back just enough for the door to open. Dr. Cade stumbled inside carrying a medkit and a bottle in a paper bag like he'd come prepared for both surgery and a breakdown. He froze the moment he saw Selena. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then he slowly turned his head toward me. "Nathan," he whispered, "why is the Empress of the Vire in your living room?" "Long story," I said. "Short version. My job description lied." Cade snapped out of it and dropped to his knees beside me, pulling out scanners and gel packs with trembling hands. He ran a sensor over my right arm. The device beeped rapidly. His brows knit. Then his eyes widened with the kind of excitement doctors should never feel around injured people. "Fascinating," he breathed. "Doc," I warned. He ignored me. He adjusted the scanner and projected the image into the air. My skin, burned and angry, lit up with a holographic overlay showing damage patterns. But Cade wasn't looking at the burn. He was looking at the shape. "It's not random," he muttered. "Electrical burns should branch chaotically. But this," he zoomed in. The marks weren't chaotic. They were geometric. Sharp angles, nodes, parallel lines, like a circuit map stamped into flesh. I stared at it, throat tightening. "It looks like I got branded," I said. "It looks like data transfer," Cade corrected, voice trembling. "Or an attempt at one." Selena stepped closer, drawn in despite herself, her violet eyes fixed on the projection. Her face drained of what little color it had. "That pattern," she whispered. Sable shifted uneasily. Iris stopped pacing completely. I looked at them all. Then I looked at the door. The steel door that didn't match the rest of the house. The steel door they guarded every night. The steel door Sable had barricaded first, before checking windows, before checking corners, before anything else. A cold realization slid into place like a locking bolt. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the ache. "I've been watching you," I said, voice low. Sable's gaze snapped to mine. "What?" "You three stand outside my door every night," I continued. "Same formation, same posture, like you're guarding something." Pointed at the door. "But when we ran in here, you didn't check for surveillance. You didn't scan for bugs. You didn't cover the windows." I stepped closer to Sable. "You locked the door." I turned to Selena. "You weren't guarding me," I said. "You were guarding this house." The air thickened. Sable's face turned to stone. Selena's lips parted, but no words came out. Iris swallowed hard. I stared at them until the silence couldn't breathe anymore. "Why?" I demanded. "What's so special about my door?" Sable didn't answer. Selena finally did. Her voice was soft, like she was confessing a sin. "We do not know what is behind it," she said. My blood ran cold. "You don't know?" I repeated. Selena shook her head slowly. "We only know," she whispered, eyes flicking to the door frame. "The Senate requires us to stand here. Every night. From 2200 to 0400. If we do not, they threaten to purge our sanctum." Cade's face went pale. "You're not guards," he murmured. "You're a battery," Iris said bitterly. "Or a key." I stared at the steel door again. It was still, silent, ordinary. But now I could see it. Faint etched lines beneath the beige paint on the frame. Almost invisible, almost hidden. And they matched the pattern burned into my arm. My voice came out rough. "So," I said slowly, "I moved into a glorified lock." No one contradicted me. Outside, drones circled. Inside, my home no longer felt like a home. It felt like the center of a machine I didn't understand. And I had a terrible feeling the colony had built it that way on purpose. The colony clock ticked forward like it was counting down to an execution. 2204, 2209, 2213. No one spoke much after the truth came out. Dr. Cade sat at my dining table with his scanner, running the same readings again and again like the numbers might suddenly become less insane. Iris hovered near the kitchen, pretending she wasn't watching the windows. Sable stayed near the front door, baton in hand, eyes locked on the frame like she expected it to bite. And Selena stood in the center of the room, still as a statue, but her breathing was too shallow, too controlled, like she was bracing for something she'd been forced to endure so many times that she no longer needed to be told when it was coming. I watched her, trying to make sense of the impossible. A colony that called itself quiet, a Senate that preached order, and an exiled empress who had to stand outside my door every night like a ritual sacrifice. "Why here?" I asked finally, voice low. Selina didn't look at me. I do not know, she said. We were told this location is necessary. Sable's mouth tightened. It is state security, she said sharply. Do not ask again. I stared at her. State security had tried to poison Selina and blow her into pieces. State security had labeled me contaminated. State security had 50 rifles pointed at my chest less than an hour ago. State security can kiss my burned hand, I muttered. Iris smirked. Sable didn't. The silence stretched again. Then, a sound filled the room. Not loud. Not even audible in the normal sense. It was a vibration. A deep rhythmic thumping that you felt in your teeth and bones more than your ears. Thump, 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 like a giant mechanical heart beating under my floorboards. Cade's head snapped up. His scanner beeped wildly. Sable was instantly on her feet, baton raised. Iris sucked in a sharp breath. And Selina doubled slightly, fingers clutching the fabric of her robe at her chest. It's starting, she whispered. What's starting? I demanded, standing despite the ache. Selina didn't answer. She didn't need to, because her body began to move. Not like she chose to, like something inside her was pulling the strings. She turned toward the front door with slow, inevitable precision. Sable moved too, stepping to the right side of the frame. Iris stepped to the left. They fell into formation without a word. Selina in the center. Sable right flank. Iris left flank. Facing the steel door. Guarding it. Or plugging into it. The thumping grew stronger. The air thickened with static so fast my skin prickled. The lights flickered once. Twice. Then steadied like the house itself was trying to pretend it wasn't terrified. Then the door frame began to vibrate. The beige paint on the metal seams flaked away in tiny curling strips. And a faint violet glow began to bleed through the cracks. Cade's voice came out shaky. That's not decorative lighting. No, I said, throat dry. That's power. Selina's breathing hitched. A thin sound escaped her throat. Half gasp, half whimper. Her veins began to glow brighter beneath her pale skin, pulsing in sync with the thumping beneath the floor. Thump, thump, thump. Her eyes squeezed shut. Sweat beaded on her forehead instantly. It hurts, she whispered. Sable's voice turned harsh, almost robotic. Do not approach, she snapped at me. Stay back. Why? I demanded. What's it doing to her? Selina's head tilted back, neck exposed, jaw clenched so hard it trembled. The blood, she gasped. It's twisting, like hands inside her veins tightening and pulling. Static pressure filled the room like a storm forming indoors. My hair stood up. The air smelled faintly of ozone. Selina's glow intensified until it hurt to look at her. Cade aimed his scanner at the doorframe. The device screamed warnings. High-frequency transmission, he shouted. It's coming from below the foundation. The door is acting as a receiver. Receiver. I stared at the door, then at Selina, then at the formation. They weren't guarding the door. They were feeding it. They're the output, I realized. I took a step forward. Sable's baton crackled violently. I said stay back. I ignored her. The colony's announcement earlier echoed in my memory. Mandatory distance, isolation protocol, terminal sanction. None of it mattered if Selina was being tortured in my living room. I moved closer. The static hit me like a wall. My skin crawled. My suit insulation dampened most of it, but the pressure still made my teeth ache. Selina's voice broke. I cannot stop, she whispered. It demands flow. Flow of what? I demanded. Her eyes snapped open. Completely white, violet swallowed into brightness. Charge, she rasped. It demands my charge. The door frame glowed brighter. The seams pulsed. The thumping became a roar. Selina trembled violently now, her whole body straining like she was being drained from the inside. And in that moment, I understood something terrible. This wasn't a ritual. This was extraction. They were siphoning her. Every night. For years. I swore under my breath and stepped fully into the circle. Sable shouted something, An order, a warning, maybe a prayer. I didn't listen. I reached Selena. She looked at me through pain-blinded eyes. "Run," she mouthed. "It'll kill you." I gritted my teeth. "I'm already here," I growled. "Might as well commit." I didn't grab her wrist this time. I placed my hand flat against the center of her chest, right over her heart. The shock hit instantly. Not a strike. A flood. Electricity surged into my arm and slammed into my body like a wave. Pain tore through my nerves. But I held firm. I grounded myself. Feet planted. Breath controlled. I let the energy flow into me, through my reinforced pathways, through scar tissue and stubborn biology, down into the floor. "Let it go," I commanded her through clenched teeth. "Give it to me." Selena gasped. Her body shuddered. And then, the pressure in her veins shifted. Like a dam opening, the charge poured into me. It burned. It screamed. But it relieved her. Her glow dimmed slightly. Her shoulders loosened. Her breathing steadied. The door's violet light flickered. The thumping faltered. Thump, thump. It stopped. The glow died. The frame went dark. The house lights steadied. Silence returned. But this time, it was real silence. Selena sagged forward, almost collapsing. Sable caught her instinctively, eyes wide with disbelief. I stumbled back, chest heaving, my palm smoking faintly where it had pressed against Selena's robe. I stared at the door, then at my hand, then at Selena. "It stopped," she whispered. Her voice was shaken, like she didn't trust the quiet. "Yes," I panted. And whoever's pulling the strings just felt the tension snap. Sable stared at me like I'd just rewritten the laws of their world. "You disrupted the cycle," she whispered. I wiped sweat from my brow with my left hand, trying not to collapse. "Good," I rasped. "Let them notice." Because now I knew the truth. My house wasn't just a home. It was a machine, and I had just reached inside and jammed a wrench into its gears. The silence didn't last long. It never does. For a few seconds after the door's glow died, we just stood there, frozen in the aftermath like survivors of a lightning strike. Selena leaned against Sable, breathing hard, her face slick with sweat. Iris stared at the door frame as if it might suddenly flare back to life and bite her. Dr. Cade was shaking, not from fear, from realization. He kept checking his scanner like the numbers had to be wrong. "They'll see it," he whispered. "The drop in power, the interruption in transmission. They'll see it immediately." "Let them?" I rasped, trying to sound stronger than I felt. My chest still buzzed like I'd swallowed a live battery. My right arm throbbed in ugly pulses, nerves firing and misfiring as if they couldn't decide whether to scream or shut down. Selena lifted her head slowly. Her violet eyes met mine. For the first time, I didn't see resignation in them. I saw something fragile and dangerous. Hope. Then the wall console chimed. A single sharp tone that made all of us flinch. Sable snapped into motion, baton raised again. I dragged myself to the console, blinking hard as the screen came into focus. Red text scrolled across it in a cold, official font. "Attention! Citizen Rook, Directive 99 Alpha Immediate Isolation Protocol Subject. Rook, Nathan status. Biological contaminant order. Maintain minimum distance of 10 meters from Imperial Subject Selena Ares. Interaction forbidden. Violation will result in terminal sanction." I stared at the word contaminant like it had personally insulted my mother. Then I laughed. Came out dry and ugly. "Contaminant," I muttered. "That's a new one. Usually they just call me cheap labor." Cade's face went pale. "They're scared," he said. "They know what you did. You grounded her. You broke their circuit." Sable moved to the window and peeled back the blinds a fraction. Her body went rigid. "They're repositioning," she said. I crawled off the couch and forced myself to my feet, legs wobbling. I joined her at the window and squinted through the slats. The street looked empty. But it was the wrong kind of empty. Above the streetlights, drones hovered, black shapes against the dome's dim glow. More than before, their lenses rotated slowly, scanning, searching. One drone dipped lower, A thin red beam swept across the pavement. Thermal scan. I swallowed. They're tightening the net, I said. Iris hugged herself, eyes wide. They're going to burn the house, she whispered. They always burn the problem. Selena's breath caught. Sable turned, voice low and deadly. They cannot leave, she said. Not now. Not after the cycle broke. Cade looked between us. If the colony proves a human can touch her and survive, he began. They'll dissect him, Sable finished coldly. I stared at the door, the steel barrier that had been the center of everything. I finally understood what I was now. Not a citizen, not an employee, not even a person. I was evidence, a walking flaw in their system. And flaws don't get pensions. Flaws get erased. I turned to Selena. She stood very still, hands clenched, as if she was holding herself together through sheer force. I'm sorry, she whispered. Her voice was raw. I brought the storm to your quiet life. I looked at the drones outside, at the red scanning beams, at the colony's manufactured calm. Then I looked back at the three women in my living room. The queen, the blade, the spark, and I realized something with a cold clarity. Echoil had never been quiet. It had only been silent because everyone was afraid to make noise. And now, we'd made enough noise to wake the whole machine. The first hiss came from the front door. Soft, mechanical, a sound so quiet you might mistake it for the ventilation system, if you weren't listening like your life depended on it. We were listening. Sable's head snapped toward the steel barrier. Her baton crackled once, hungry. They're overriding the lock, she said. I felt my stomach drop. The colony wasn't going to wait until morning. It wasn't going to negotiate. It was going to solve the problem the way systems always solve problems. Remove the anomaly. I forced my legs to move, ignoring the pain. Iris, I barked. Window. Iris spun toward the side window, already yanking the blinds open. Sable moved in front of Selena like a wall. Cade clutched his medkit like it was a weapon. And me? I grabbed the wall panel and killed the lights. The room plunged into darkness. Instantly, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a bunker. The only illumination came from Selena's veins, dim violet pulsing beneath her skin like a heartbeat. Her glow painted all our faces in ghostlight. The door hissed again, bolts sliding, a lock being defeated. Then, a knock, not polite, not human, a heavy metallic thud, like someone testing how hard they'd need to hit to break through. Sable's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Stay behind me. Not a chance, I muttered. I crossed the room and shoved my hand into the nearest crate, tearing it open until my fingers hit the spare maintenance hatch key I'd been issued when I took the job. Every unit had one. Most people never used it. I did. I ripped open the floor access panel near the kitchen and yanked it up. A ladder descended into darkness. The smell hit immediately. Damp concrete, old coolant, and the sour stink of infrastructure no one wanted to think about. Underground tunnels. My favorite kind of escape route. Down, I ordered. Iris went first, fast and silent like she belonged in shadows. Cade followed, awkward and panicked, nearly dropping his medkit. Selena hesitated. She stared at the ladder like it was beneath her. Then she looked at me and stepped forward. Sable guided her down, one hand on Selena's elbow, the other holding her baton ready. I climbed last, closing the panel above us as the door outside began to groan. Metal protesting, pressure building. We hit the tunnel floor and started moving. The underground of Echoil was nothing like the surface. Above ground, everything was clean, quiet, pretty. Below ground, the colony was honest. Pipes rattled. Steam hissed. Water dripped in slow, constant rhythm. The air was thick and wet, heavy with the smell of work. We moved fast through narrow corridors, guided by dim emergency strips that cast long shadows. Then a voice echoed from the darkness ahead. About time, Rook. A figure stepped into Selena's violet glow. A slim man in grease-stained coveralls, AR goggles pushed up on his forehead. He held a tablet wired into a junction box like he'd been waiting for us. Kaido Ri. infrastructure engineer, one of the few people in Echoil who still looked alive. He grinned at me like I just arrived late to a party. "You look terrible," he said cheerfully. I exhaled in relief so sharp it almost hurt. "Co," I rasped. "Tell me you've got a route that doesn't involve swimming through sewage." "I'm offended," he said, tapping his tablet. "I'm an engineer. I deal in air recyclers and power conduits. Follow me." The tunnel lights flickered, then died. Total darkness. For half a second, panic clawed at my throat. Then Kaido's voice cut through it. "I looped the sensors," he said. "Grid thinks this sector is under maintenance. Thermal scans won't pick you up down here." Sable didn't relax. Not even slightly. "Move," she snapped. We ran. Through the colony's guts. Through steam and rust. Through narrow passages that twisted like arteries. Kaido led us with confident precision, taking turns that made no sense until they did. We passed locked security doors, bypassed them through service vents, climbed ladders that rattled under our weight. After nearly an hour, the air grew colder, drier, sharper, and I knew that smell. Real atmosphere. Kaido stopped at a massive circular hatch marked with warning symbols. "This is the outer shell," he said. "Beyond this is the Badlands." Iris groaned. "Freezing death wilderness," she muttered. "Great." Kaido spun the manual release wheel. It screeched like tortured metal. The seal broke, and the wind hit us. Not recycled. Not filtered. Raw. It smelled like sulfur, frozen dust, and ancient rock. Cold enough to freeze the moisture in my nose instantly. We stepped out onto a ledge of black basalt. Behind us, Echoil's glowing dome rose into the sky like a blister of artificial light. Ahead, the Badlands stretched endless and jagged. Obsidian spires and twisted stone under two pale moons. No holograms. No polished silence. Just real darkness. Real wind. Real freedom. I breathed it in like it was medicine. And beside me, Selena shivered. Not from cold. From something deeper. Because the moment she stepped beyond the dome, her veins pulsed erratically. Her glow flickered. And her breath hitched like her body was suddenly searching for something it couldn't find. "The signal," Cade whispered, eyes wide as he scanned her. "She's losing the carrier wave." Selena swayed. Sable caught her. And I realized with a sinking dread, we'd escaped the colony. But the colony hadn't escaped her. Selena got worse the farther we moved from the dome. It didn't make sense at first. I'd expected her to relax once we were out. Once the Senate's drones couldn't hover over her like vultures. Once the spire's invisible leash weakened. But instead, she began to shake. Not from the cold. From something inside her. Her veins flashed brighter. Then dimmed. Then surged again in violent pulses like a storm trying to escape through her skin. Every few minutes she stumbled, and every time Sable caught her, Selena's body jolted like she'd been shocked from the inside. Cade ran beside us, scanner in hand, panting hard in the heavier gravity outside the dome. "It's withdrawal," he gasped. "Withdrawal," I snapped. "The nanite mesh," he said. "It isn't just control. It's dependency. It's been feeding on the carrier wave for years. Now it's losing the signal, so it's ramping up power to find it." I stared at Selena's trembling hands. "You mean it's trying harder?" I said. Cade nodded grimly. "And it's drawing that energy from her biology. If it keeps doing that, she'll overload." Overload. That was a polite word for something ugly. Explode. We pushed on through the Badlands until Kaido found a narrow fissure in the rock face. An opening into a cave system where warm steam drifted from deep geothermal vents. The air inside was humid, thick with mineral scent. The stone walls glistened with condensation. Should have been safe. Sheltered. But the moment Selena stepped inside, she collapsed. Not gently. She hit the stone like her legs had been cut out from under her. Sable dropped beside her instantly, trying to hold her up without triggering discharge. Iris backed away, eyes wide. "She's flashing," Iris whispered. Selena's skin was glowing violently now. Bright violet light strobing through her veins like lightning trapped in a cage. Sparks snapped between her fingers and scorched black marks into the stone floor. Her mouth opened in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back. Sable's voice cracked for the first time. "Highness, fight it!" Selena convulsed. "I can't," she gasped. "It's pulling." Cade shoved his scanner toward her chest. "She needs to discharge," he shouted. "If she doesn't ground the energy, her organs will cook." I looked at the cave floor. Stone. Dry rock. Terrible conductor. "Ground it where?" Iris shouted, panic rising. Sable's jaw clenched. "I can't take it," she hissed. "Our frequencies are the same. If I touch her now, we amplify. We both detonate." Selena's glow surged brighter, blinding. The air smelled like ozone and burning hair. And I realized the truth. This wasn't a slow problem. This was seconds. I dropped my pack and tore off my heavy outer jacket, exposing the salvage suit beneath. The insulation wouldn't save me from this. Not fully. But it might keep me alive long enough. "Nathan," Cade warned, voice high. "Last time was a quick touch. This is gigajoules of discharge." I stepped closer anyway. "If she doesn't do it," I said, voice grim, "she dies." Selena's eyes snapped toward me, white, terrified. "Go away," she rasped. "I burn." "Yeah," I muttered. I noticed. I knelt beside her, fighting the static pressure that shoved against me like a physical force. Her body was shaking violently. Her glow lit the entire cave like a lightning storm trapped in human skin. And for the first time, I didn't see an empress. I saw a prisoner, a woman who had spent her entire life terrified of her own touch. I wrapped my arms around her, chest to chest. Full contact. No distance. No hesitation. The cave flashed white. It wasn't a strike. It was a flood. Felt like I swallowed a star. Every muscle in my body seized. My jaw clamped so hard I felt something crack. Heat ripped through my nerves, through my bones, through my heart like it was trying to shut me down permanently. Selena clung to me like drowning. Her nails dug into my back, shredding fabric. She buried her face against my neck and sobbed, raw, desperate sounds lost beneath the crackle of discharge. But the energy had a path now. It flowed into me, through me, down. And slowly, the violent strobing in her veins began to fade. The sparks stopped snapping. The hum softened. Her body stopped convulsing. And the air, heavy with pressure, finally loosened. I slumped back against the cave wall, dragging Selena with me. She lay across my lap, limp and exhausted, breathing hard. For a long moment, the only sound was our breathing. Then Iris's small voice came from the shadows. "You smell like barbecue." I coughed, smoke drifting off my shoulder. "Hickory smoked," I wheezed. "Extra spicy." Cade rushed forward, scanning my chest. "Arrhythmia," he muttered. "Severe dehydration. Burns. First degree across most contact surface." He looked up, stunned. "But alive." Selena stirred. Her eyes were violet again, soft, clear, human. She lifted her head slowly and looked at me like she was seeing the universe for the first time. Her fingers rose, trembling, and touched my cheek. No spark, no shock, just warmth. Her breath hitched. She whispered, "I have never felt warmth without pain." I swallowed, throat raw. "Usually," I rasped, "it involves less electrocution." Her lips parted slightly, and she leaned closer. Not regal, not calculated. Curious, desperate, free. Her mouth brushed mine in a clumsy, urgent kiss that tasted of ozone and salt. For 5 seconds, the universe forgot to be cruel. Then she pulled back, eyes wide like she'd discovered a new color. "Oh," she breathed. "Yeah," I croaked. "Oh." At the cave entrance, Sable stood with her back turned, rigid, staring out into the storm like she hadn't seen anything. But I knew she had. And the fact that she chose not to turn around, that was the first real act of rebellion. The quiet didn't last. It never did. Not in Echoill. Not in the Badlands. Not in any place built on control. The wind outside the cave picked up, howling through the obsidian spires like something alive and angry. Dust swirled in pale ribbons beneath the moons, cutting visibility down to shifting shadows. Sable stood at the entrance, still facing outward, still pretending she hadn't witnessed the Empress kiss a human mechanic like the universe had just rewritten its rules. Iris sat cross-legged in the corner, smirking faintly, pretending she wasn't shaking. Kaido was busy pretending the cave wall was fascinating. Cade kept checking my vitals like he expected my heart to change its mind and quit out of spite. And Selena stayed close, not touching, but close enough that I could feel her presence like warmth in cold air. Her glow had dimmed to a faint, steady pulse, conserving energy, controlled. But her eyes were awake now, sharp, no longer a prisoner drifting through life. A woman who had tasted freedom and realized how much had been stolen from her. Then the sound cut through the wind. A high-pitched whine. Not natural. Mechanical. A light brighter than the moon swept across the Badlands, slicing through dust and shadow. Sable stiffened instantly. "Drone," she hissed. I rose slowly, forcing my legs to cooperate. The drone that hovered outside the cave mouth wasn't an attack unit. No weapon mounts. No pulse turrets. It was a Herald armored quadcopter with a projector rig slung beneath it like a hanging throat. It hovered just beyond the cave entrance, its red lens blinking calmly as if it had all the time in the universe. Then the projector flared. A beam of light hit the damp stone wall and expanded outward into a towering hologram. Chancellor Ormond Seer, 10 feet tall, immaculate. Even as a projection, he looked like a man who'd never been forced to crawl through dirt to survive. His expression was calm. Too calm. The calm of someone who believes they're speaking to doomed people. "Citizen Rook," Ormond's voice boomed, amplified so loudly it vibrated the cave walls. "Empress Selena." Selena stepped forward beside me. Her posture changed instantly. No trembling. No weakness. The Empress returned like armor. "I see you found a hole to crawl into," Ormond continued, his tone almost amused. "How fitting. Royalty in the mud with a mechanic." My jaw tightened. I stepped closer to the cave mouth, placing myself between Selena and the projection instinctively. "You're loud," I shouted back. "For a man hiding behind a camera." Ormond smiled. "And you are persistent," he replied smoothly. "For a dead man." His holographic gaze shifted to Selena. "Highness," he said, voice dripping false sympathy. "You look diminished, dirty, common. Freedom does not suit you." Selena's voice cut through the cave like steel. "I am free," she said. "And I know about the mesh. I know about the control signal. You cannot use me anymore." Ormond laughed. "Cold. Digital. Use you?" he said. "My dear child, you misunderstand." The hologram flickered. Then the projection changed. A schematic of the spire appeared, Ecoil's central command tower, glowing red at the apex like a wound. Ormond's smile widened. "You are not merely a user of the signal," he said. "You are the host." Selena's breath hitched. Cade's face drained of color. "What does that mean?" I demanded. Ormond leaned forward slightly, enjoying himself. "It means," he said, "that if the host becomes unruly, we have protocols." He tapped a control on his side. The spire schematic zoomed in on the resonance core. Numbers flashed. Power output rising. 20%, 35%, 50%. "We have been running the broadcast at minimal capacity," Ormond explained. "Just enough to keep the myth alive. Just enough to keep you docile." Selena clenched her fists. I saw the tremor start again beneath her skin. "But since you have decided to run," Ormond continued, voice sharpening, "I am authorizing a full-spectrum purge." My blood went cold. "You'd kill her," I spat. Ormond tilted his head. "I will do more than kill her," he said calmly. "I will turn the volume up to 100%. Selena gasped, clutching her chest. Her veins flickered violently for a second like the spire had reached into her blood and squeezed. Ormond's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "It will not just hurt the Empress," he said. It will vibrate the nanites in every vire until they boil. Every vampire woman in Echoil will become a walking incendiary bomb. Iris whispered, horrified. He'll burn us all. Orman nodded as if he'd just confirmed a weather report. And I will blame it on you, he added, looking at me. The rogue human who kidnapped the Empress and destabilized her biology. Selena's voice broke. He will do it, she whispered. He has no soul. Orman's hologram straightened. Surrender, he commanded. Walk out of that cave. Return to the sanctum. Submit to recalibration. His smile sharpened. Or watch your people burn at dawn. The projection cut out. The drone hovered for one more heartbeat. Its red lens blinking like an eye, then zipped away into the storm. Darkness returned. Wind howled. Selena sank to her knees. Sable paced like a caged predator, rage shaking her hands. Cade stared at his scanner, whispering calculations like prayers. And I stood at the cave mouth staring toward the distant glow of the dome. Even from here I could see it. The spire, a red pulse at its tip, brightening slowly, charging, preparing to scream into Selena's blood. I turned back to the group. My voice came out cold. We're not running anymore, I said. Iris blinked. What? He wants to turn the volume up? I said, pointing toward the spire's distant red glow. Fine. I looked at Selena. Her violet eyes lifted to meet mine, terrified but burning with determination. Then we cut the cord, I said. Sable's gaze sharpened. You want to attack the spire. It's a machine, I said. Machines have cables, junctions, power feeds. I stepped forward, pain and exhaustion forgotten beneath something harder. Resolve. Dawn is coming, I said. Let's go break some stuff. We didn't have time to rest. The Badlands didn't care about exhaustion, and neither did the Senate. Dawn crept up slowly, not a warm sunrise, but a bruised purple smear across the horizon. The wind was still biting, still thick with dust and sulfur. Every breath tasted like ancient rock. We moved fast through jagged obsidian spires, using the stone formations as cover while Kaido guided us toward an old maintenance tunnel that would lead back under the dome. Selena walked beside me, her glow dim and controlled, conserving energy like a weapon waiting to be drawn. Sable stayed close, baton in hand. Iris kept scanning the ridges like she expected the sky to fall. Cade followed, muttering readings under his breath. Then Kaido stopped dead. His tablet beeped. He stared at the screen like it had insulted him. I'm reading a massive energy spike, he whispered. Sable crouched instantly. From the spire? Kaido shook his head slowly, eyes wide. No, he said. It's mobile. And it's close. I felt my stomach tighten. How close? I asked. Kaido swallowed. Point blank. The ridge in front of us exploded. Not with fire, with sound. A sonic boom cracked the rock face like a giant fist punching through stone. Boulders tumbled down the slope, dust erupting into a thick gray cloud that swallowed the world. We hit the ground instinctively. Sable dragged Selena behind a jagged slab of basalt. Iris pressed her back to the stone, daggers drawn. I squinted through the dust. A shape emerged, a shadow bigger than anything that should exist outside a war zone. I stepped forward, and the ground shook. A walker, but not the patrol unit's Echoil used for crowd control. This thing was a leviathan, 3 stories tall, 4 massive hydraulic legs crushing rock like it was brittle glass, matte black armor plating, executioner markings, a moving fortress designed to make rebellion feel like a joke. And mounted on its back, a dish, parabolic, huge, glowing with malevolent crimson light. The hum that radiated from it wasn't just sound. It was pressure. It made my vision blur and my teeth ache like the air itself was vibrating in protest. Cade's voice trembled. The resonance machine, he whispered. They deployed it. Selena gasped like she'd been stabbed. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest. The moment the dish cleared the ridge, her veins began to flash violently beneath her skin. The nanites in her blood reacted instantly, hungry and panicked, trying to obey the signal. Selena's mouth opened in a silent scream. Her body convulsed. Sable grabbed her shoulders, trying to hold her steady. Selena! I dropped beside her. Talk to me. What's it doing? It's singing, she choked out. Inside my blood. It's commanding it to boil. The Leviathan took another step forward. The ground trembled. A loudspeaker on its hull crackled to life with a synthetic voice, cold and mechanical. Target acquired. Designation: Empress. Preparing purge protocol. A status bar flashed across its hull display. Charge cycle: 20%. The dish glowed brighter. Selena arched in agony. Smoke curled from her fingertips. I can't hold it, she gasped. Nathan, run. Her eyes found mine, wild, pleading. You have to get away from me. She tried to push me back, but her hands were weak. I'm a bomb, she whispered. Let me detonate far from you. I grabbed her wrist, through cloth careful. No, I snarled. You are not a bomb. The Leviathan's voice continued. Charge cycle: 35%, 50%. The crimson glow intensified. Selena's skin began to strobe again. The air around her smelled of ozone and burning hair. Cade shouted over the rising hum. It's a directional emitter. If it fires a full pulse, she won't just die, she'll detonate. Selena struggled to stand. I'm surrendering, she whispered. If I go to it, it will stop. It will spare you. Sable's face cracked with panic. No, but Selena's expression was resigned, like she'd been trained her whole life to sacrifice herself for order. I looked up at the Leviathan, at the dish, at the glowing charge cycle, and something old and savage in me snapped. I'd spent 20 years in salvage, crawling over broken machines in the dark, pulling systems apart piece by piece until I understood how they worked. This was just another machine. A bigger one, a louder one, but still a machine. I turned to Kaido. Can you jam it? Kaido's fingers flew across his tablet. He shook his head violently. No, signal's too strong. Encrypted hardline. It's broadcasting directly into her mesh. I turned to Sable. Can you shoot it? Sable spat. My baton is a toothpick against that armor. Then we don't shoot it, I said, already stripping off my heavy coat. We climb it. Kate stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Nathan. I ignored him. I checked the mag clamps on my boots and gloves. I looked at Selena. Her eyes were wet with terror. Nathan, she whispered. Please. I grabbed her face with both hands, sparks biting my palms even through cloth. Stay down, I ordered. Her breath hitched. Don't die, I growled. That's a direct order from your human liaison. Then I turned and sprinted. Not away, straight at the Leviathan. The machine's targeting systems reacted instantly. Hostile detected. Engaging defense. A turret mounted under the dish swiveled. Tracer fire ripped across the ground in front of me, chewing up basalt and throwing sparks. I dove, rolled behind a rock, then burst forward again, zigzagging through the spires. The Leviathan tried to track me, but it was slow, built for intimidation, not agility. I closed the distance. My boots hit the base of its front leg. Steel piston, hot hydraulics, vibrating with power. I slapped my palm against it. Mag clamps engage, I muttered. My gloves and boots locked onto the metal with a hard click. And I started climbing. The Leviathan lifted its leg, trying to shake me off like a bug. My body slammed against the plating. My burned arm screamed, but I held on. I climbed higher, higher, up toward the deck where the dish hummed like a god preparing to strike. Behind me, Selena screamed. The charge cycle hit, 75%. And I realized with cold certainty, I didn't have much time. The Leviathan's armor vibrated under my hands like it was alive. Every step it took sent shockwaves through its frame, and each shockwave slammed through my arms and teeth like a hammer. Wind whipped at my face, cold enough to cut. The dish above me glowed brighter with every second, humming with a frequency that made my vision blur. I kept climbing anyway. Metal rungs, bolts, maintenance seams. Machines always had seams. Even monsters. A turret swiveled toward me, barrel rotating with a high-pitched whine. Defense protocol engaged. The machine announced calmly, like it was reading a weather report. Pulse fire erupted. A line of superheated rounds carved across the armor inches from my head, melting plating and spraying molten metal. I flattened myself against the hull. The smell of burning steel filled my nose. My mag clamps held. Barely. I crawled sideways, using the turret's blind angle, and found what I'd been praying for. A maintenance hatch. A rectangular panel bolted into the upper leg housing. I ripped out my hydrospanner. Yes, I'd grabbed it after all and jammed it into the seam. "Come on," I hissed. The spanner groaned. Bolts popped. The panel ripped free. Hot air blasted my face. Inside was a cramped cavity full of wiring and conduits, thick power cables braided like veins. And there, glowing faintly in the center, was the emitter feed line, the Leviathan's throat. I yanked myself into the cavity, half hanging by my boots, and reached for the cable. My gauntlet scanner flashed warnings instantly. Energy output, critical contact, fatal. I laughed once, breathless and bitter. "Yeah," I muttered. "That checks out." Outside, the dish's hum reached a scream. The machine announced, "Charge cycle, 90%. I could hear Selena's scream even over the wind and metal. A raw sound of pain and fear. The kind of sound you make when your body is betraying you. My jaw clenched. I grabbed the feed line. The moment my fingers closed around it, agony slammed into me like a train. It wasn't just electricity. It was resonance frequency designed to command living nanites, to hijack blood chemistry like software. Surged up my arm, into my chest, into my skull. My vision went white. My teeth clamped so hard I tasted blood. But I held on. Because if I didn't, Selena would explode. I forced my gauntlet into override mode, ignoring every screaming warning. Then I did the only thing a salvage tech knows how to do when a machine is killing someone. I broke it. I wrapped the cable around my forearm and yanked with everything I had. Muscles tore. My burned arm screamed. The cable resisted, thick, reinforced, stubborn. The Leviathan took a step and the whole cavity shook. I yanked again, harder. The cable snapped. For half a second, the dish above flickered. The Leviathan's voice glitched. "Warning, warning." Then the full charge dumped. Not into Selena, into me. It hit like the sun exploding inside my chest. My heart stuttered. Once, twice, then stopped. There was no dramatic last thought. No slow fade. Just instant emptiness. The world cut to black. I don't know how long I was gone. In death, time isn't a river. It's nothing. Then, sound returned. Muffled at first. Voices. Shouting. Cade's voice. Panicked and broken. "He's dead. He's dead. Nathan, no?" Sable's voice like steel snapping. "Move him. Now." Iris sobbing. "No, no, no, no." Then Selena. A sound I'd never heard from her before. Not fear. Not pain. Grief. A shattered, animal grief that didn't belong to an empress. It belonged to a woman who had just lost the first person who ever touched her without dying. My chest was heavy. My body was cold. I was aware of weight being dragged, my weight across rock. Couldn't open my eyes. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. But somewhere deep inside, I felt hands on me. Warm. Trembling. Selena's hands. "No," she whispered. "No, you will not leave." Cade choked. "Highness, he's gone. There's no rhythm. No pulse." Selena's voice turned terrifyingly calm. "Then I will give him one." Sable's voice shook. "You cannot." "I can," Selena hissed. "I must." I felt her lean over me, felt her press her palm to my chest. Direct contact. No cloth barrier. No distance. The charge in her body surged. Not wild this time. Focused. Precise. Like she was tuning an instrument. "I listened," she whispered, "to his heart. When he held me, I remember the frequency." Cade sobbed. "This is madness." Selena didn't answer. She pressed harder. And I felt it. A pulse of energy slammed into my chest like a hammer. My body jolted. Pain ripped through me, but it wasn't killing pain. It was starting pain. A second pulse hit. Stronger. My ribs felt like they were splitting. My lungs convulsed. A third pulse. And suddenly, my heart twitched. Once, like a stubborn engine trying to turn over. Selena gasped. Yes, she whispered fiercely. Yes, again. Another pulse. My heart beat. Weak, irregular, but real. My lungs dragged in air violently, like they'd forgotten how. I choked, coughed, gasped. My eyes snapped open. The world flooded back in sharp, brutal detail. Dust, rock, blood, violet glow. Selena hovered over me, tears streaking down her pale face, eyes wide with terror and relief. I stared at her, confused, half dead. Did you? I croaked. Just defibrillate me? Selena laughed. A broken sound that turned into a sob. You are impossible, she whispered. Cade collapsed beside us, shaking, scanning my vitals like he couldn't believe the universe allowed it. He's alive, Cade whispered, stunned. He's alive. Sable stood above us, silent, but her eyes were burning with something I'd never seen there before. Respect. Iris wiped her face with her sleeve, sniffling hard. You're not allowed to die, she said angrily. We just started liking you. I tried to smile. It hurt. Everything hurt. But I was alive. I looked at Selena. Her hand was still on my chest. Warm. Steady. Not deadly. Not cursed. Just human. And in that moment, even with the Badlands wind howling and the dome glowing in the distance like a threat, I realized the truth. The Senate hadn't just enslaved a queen. They had stolen a person. And now that person had brought me back from death with her own hands. There was no going back. By the time my heartbeat steadied, the Badlands had gone quiet again. Not colony quiet, storm quiet, the kind where the wind pauses like it's watching what you'll do next. The Leviathan lay half-collapsed on the ridge behind us, its dish shattered and smoking, armor split open like a cracked shell. Crimson glow bled out of it in dying pulses, fading into nothing. Kaido crouched beside the wreck, tablet in hand, eyes gleaming with grim satisfaction. You did it, he murmured. You actually did it. I sat up slowly, every muscle protesting. Yeah, I rasped. Next time, remind me to die somewhere softer. Selena stayed close, her hand hovering near my shoulder like she was afraid I'd vanish if she blinked too long. She looked exhausted, hair damp with sweat, robe torn, glow faint, but her posture was different now. She wasn't collapsing anymore. She wasn't surrendering. She was standing. Sable approached, eyes locked on the distant dome. They will deploy more machines, she said. The Spire will increase output at dawn regardless. The Leviathan was only one limb. Cade nodded grimly. They'll reroute power, he said. The kill pulse is still coming. I forced myself to my feet. My legs shook, but I stood anyway. Then we don't wait for dawn, I said. Kaido's gaze snapped to me. You mean, we go in, I finished. I looked at Selena. End it at the source. Selena's violet eyes hardened. Yes, she said. The Spire. Kaido tapped his tablet, pulling up a schematic of Ekoil's infrastructure. The dome shimmered in the distance like a trapped sun. There's a maintenance artery under the dome, he said. Old, not used by residents. Leads straight into the Spire's lower utility core. Sable's mouth tightened. Guarded. Kaido smirked. Not from below, he said. Nobody guards their own basement. We moved. Fast. Through the rock fissures and maintenance cuts that only engineers and smugglers knew. The closer we got to the dome, the more the air shifted, warmer, cleaner, artificial. The smell of recycled oxygen crept back into my nose like an unwanted memory. When we reached the dome's underside, Kaido led us to a hidden hatch buried beneath a maintenance slab. He pried it open with practiced ease. A ladder descended into darkness. Sable went first this time, silent as a blade. I followed with Selena right behind me. And the moment we crossed into Ecoil's underbelly again, I felt it. A vibration in the floor. Not the Leviathan's hum. The spire. It was charging. Even now, deep underground, I could feel its pulse like a distant headache. We moved through tight corridors lined with thick cables and sealed conduits. The deeper we went, the more the walls changed, from cheap residential infrastructure to hardened military-grade plating. This wasn't just a city. It was a machine built around one central throat. The spire. Kaido stopped at a junction and pointed to a conduit cluster. Here, he whispered. I frowned. What? He shone his flashlight onto the cables. Etched symbols. Almost invisible. Circuit-like patterns running along the conduit casing. The same patterns I'd seen on my doorframe. The same pattern burned into my arm. My stomach turned cold. No, I whispered. Kaido nodded grimly. Yes. Cade leaned in, scanning. This conduit. It's a broadcast line, he murmured. It's feeding a node. I stared at the symbols like they were a confession. A node? I repeated slowly. Then the truth slammed into place. My house. Unit 419. The steel door. The nightly formation. The extraction. It wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't even just cruelty. It was infrastructure. My unit was part of the system. A relay point. A receiver. A control lock built into civilian housing so nobody would suspect it. They hadn't moved me into a quiet colony. They'd moved me into the center of their cage. I clenched my fists. Those bastards. I breathed. Selena's voice was low. They built a prison, she said, and hid the locks in plain sight. We kept moving. The corridors narrowed into a vertical shaft with ladders and access platforms. Above us, the spire rose like a spine. Kaido climbed fast, leading the way. Sable followed. I went next, burned arm screaming, but adrenaline keeping me upright. Selena climbed behind me, graceful, silent. At the top, we reached a reinforced service door. Kaido connected his tablet to the panel and began hacking. The lock resisted for 3 seconds. Then it clicked. The door slid open, and we stepped into the spire. It was colder inside, sterile, clinical. The walls were smooth white polymer, lit by thin strips of pale light. The air smelled like disinfectant and expensive lies. We moved down a hallway lined with sealed doors. No guards. No cameras. No alarms. Too easy. I hated that. Where is everyone? Iris whispered. Sable's eyes narrowed. It is a trap, she said. Kaido nodded slowly. He wants us to come, he murmured. He wants the Empress here. Selena's jaw clenched. Then we give him what he wants, she said. We reached the end of the corridor. A set of double doors marked with the Senate crest. Chancellor's office. Kaido glanced at me. This is it. I stared at the doors. Behind them was the man who tried to poison a queen. The man who tried to burn an entire species. The man who built a cage and called it peace. I stepped forward and shoved the doors open. They swung wide. And inside, Chancellor Ormonseer was waiting. Alone. Sitting behind his desk like he'd been expecting guests. His smile was calm. Welcoming. Like this was a meeting, not a war. Ah, he said softly. His eyes flicked to Selena. Then to me. Right on time. Ormonseer didn't stand when we entered. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't even look surprised. He just sat behind his desk. Hands folded neatly, posture perfect. Like we'd arrived for a scheduled appointment instead of an uprising. The office itself was obscene. Not in size. In comfort. Warm lighting. Real wood panels. A shelf lined with antique books that probably hadn't been opened in decades. A private oxygen purifier humming softly in the corner. Even the air smelled different. Cleaner, richer, like money had its own perfume. Ormon's gaze moved slowly across us. He lingered on my burned arm. On Selena's torn robes. On Sable's battered armor. On Iris's blood-stained daggers. Then he smiled like a father amused by children tracking mud into his house. You've made quite a mess, he said. Selena stepped forward. Her voice was steady, royal, dangerous. You tried to kill me. Orman nodded calmly. Yes, he said. And you survived. Congratulations. I felt my hands curl into fists. You murdered your own citizens in the Grand Hall. I snarled. You tried to blame it on her. Orman's smile didn't move. Citizen Rook, he said almost gently. You speak as if truth matters. That made my skin crawl. He wasn't denying anything. He wasn't even justifying it. He was confessing, because he believed he'd already won. Orman rose slowly from his chair and walked around the desk, stopping in front of the window. Beyond the glass, Echoil stretched out beneath the dome like a sleeping animal. So much order, he murmured. So much peace. He turned to Selena. You know why your people were exiled? He asked. Selena's eyes narrowed. Because humans feared us, she said. Orman laughed softly. No, he said. Because humans couldn't control you. He gestured with one hand, like he was teaching a lesson. You were born with power, he continued. Not political power, not wealth, biological power. You were a species that could not be subdued by simple chains. His eyes gleamed. So we did what humans always do, he said. We made your power useful. Cade's voice trembled. The mesh. Orman nodded. Yes, he said proudly. Nanite lattice bonded to Vire blood. A perfect interface between biology and infrastructure. Selena's jaw clenched. You enslaved us, she said. Orman tilted his head. I integrated you, he corrected. I stepped forward. And my house, I spat. The door. Orman looked at me like I'd finally asked the correct question. Ah, he said. Unit 419. He smiled wider. You weren't assigned there randomly, Citizen Rook, he said. You were selected. My blood went ice cold. Selected, I repeated. Orman nodded. You are a salvage technician, he said. A man with unusual tolerance for electrical trauma. A man with a history of exposure to ion storms and fusion discharge. A man whose nervous system has adapted. Selena turned sharply toward me. What is he saying? Orman answered for me. I'm saying, he purred, that you were the missing piece. My stomach twisted. You wanted me to touch her, I whispered. Orman spread his hands like a priest. We needed to know, he said, if it was possible, if a human could survive contact, if the myth of untouchability could be broken. He looked at Selena. Because if a human can touch you, he said softly, then you are no longer divine. His eyes slid back to me. You become property. Selena's glow flickered, anger rising. Sable's baton crackled violently. Iris shifted, ready to strike. But Orman wasn't afraid, because he was still smiling. He tapped a control panel on his desk. The room's far wall lit up, massive display screens flickering to life. Every screen showed the same thing. The Spire core. A massive column of pulsing violet energy wrapped in containment rings, humming like a sleeping god. The charge meter climbed. Kill signal, 82%. Orman's voice softened. I told you, he said. At dawn, your people burn. Selena stepped forward, her voice shaking with rage. You will not. Orman leaned closer. Will you stop me? He whispered. Will you kill me? Selena froze, because she knew. If she killed him, the Senate would call it proof she was a monster, and the colony would beg for her execution. Orman smiled at her hesitation. That's the beauty of control, he said. It makes even queens hesitate. That was when I moved. Not toward him, toward the console. Kaido was already there, fingers flying across the interface. Sable blocked Orman's line of sight. Iris stepped to the side, daggers ready. Cade whispered urgently. Hurry. He's routing the broadcast through the city grid. Orman's eyes widened slightly. Not fear. Annoyance. You think you can hack Senate encryption? He snapped at Kaido. Kaido grinned without looking up. I'm not hacking, he said. I'm rerouting. The screens flickered. Orman stepped forward, and Sable slammed her baton into the floor, discharging a crackling arc that forced him back with a snarl. "Stay," she growled. Orman's calm cracked for the first time. "You savage." Kaido hit the final command. The screens changed. Not Spire Core. Not schematics. A live broadcast feed. Every public display in Echo-Il. Every home console. Every street hollow. Every Senate announcement channel. All of it lit up with one image. Orman Sear's office. Orman himself caught mid-snarl. Selena standing in torn robes beside a human. The myth broken. The truth visible. Orman's face went pale. "No," he whispered. I stepped into frame, staring straight into the camera lens. "Echo-Il Colony," I said, voice rough, loud enough to shake the walls. "You've been lied to." Orman lunged toward the console. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the desk hard enough to rattle the antique books. He gasped. I leaned close. "This is what you forgot," I hissed. "Machines don't run on fear." I pointed at Selena. "They run on power." Selena stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Citizens of Echo-Il," she said, voice carrying a royal authority that didn't need a throne. "You have been told I am a monster." She raised her hand. Electricity crackled faintly but controlled. "But the true monster," she said, pointing at Orman, "is the one who put chains in our blood and called it peace." Orman screamed. "Shut it off! Shut it off!" Kaido shouted over him. "Core at 94%. We have seconds." Cade's scanner beeped wildly. "If it hits 100, the pulse will fire automatically." I turned to Selena. Her eyes met mine. "No fear now. Only resolve." "We end it," she whispered. She stepped toward the Spire Core control interface. Sable moved to stop her instinctively. "Highness." Selena shook her head. "No," she said. "I began as their battery." Her glow intensified. "I will end as their breaker." She placed both palms on the core interface. "And let go. Not violently. Not explosively. Deliberately." She inverted her frequency, flipping the resonance like turning a key the other way. The core screamed. The entire spire shook. Lights burst overhead. The charge meter hit 99%, then dropped 60, 40, 15, 0. The hum died like a beast being strangled. The screens across Echo-Il flickered. The colony's artificial silence broke. Outside the window, lights across the dome blinked and stuttered, then steadied into a softer, natural glow. The kill signal was gone. Orman stared, mouth open, like he just watched his god die. Selena stepped back, breathing hard. Her glow faded. She swayed. I caught her careful, steady. No shock, no pain, just warmth. Orman's voice was small now. "You've doomed this colony," he whispered. I stared at him, disgust burning in my throat. "No," I said. "We just freed it." The first thing I noticed after the spire went dark was the sound. Not alarms, not drones, not the constant low hum of systems forcing the colony to behave. Just people. Echo-Il had always been quiet, but it was the wrong kind of quiet. A quiet made of fear. Now, for the first time, the silence cracked, and something alive leaked through. Voices rose in the streets below the dome. Shouts, confused questions, crying, angry demands. The kind of noise that meant a population was finally remembering it had a throat. Orman Sear sat on the floor of his own office, staring at nothing like his mind had been unplugged along with the spire. His perfect hair was disheveled now, his robe torn, his face slack with disbelief. He wasn't a chancellor anymore, just a man. A small man. Kaido leaned against the console, breathing hard, laughing under his breath like he couldn't stop. Cade collapsed into a chair and ran both hands through his hair, whispering, "We're alive, we're alive." Sable stood at the window, scanning the streets like a soldier even after the war had ended. But her shoulders had dropped slightly. A tension that had lived in her bones for years was finally bleeding out. And Selena didn't look triumphant. She looked exhausted, like freedom weighed more than chains at first. I kept my arm around her as we watched the colony below, People pouring out of buildings, staring up at the spire, at the screens, at the sudden absence of the invisible leash. A Senate guard squad eventually arrived. But they didn't come in firing. They came in hesitant, uncertain, because the broadcast had done something bullets couldn't. It had made them witnesses, and witnesses are dangerous. One of the guards looked at Selena, then at me, then at Orman on the floor. He swallowed hard, and lowered his rifle. The others followed. Sable watched them carefully, ready to strike at the first betrayal. But none came, because without the signal, the system wasn't sure what to command anymore. And for the first time, people were forced to decide for themselves. We didn't stay in the spire long. Echoil would have to rebuild. Politically, socially, spiritually. It would be messy, loud, painful, but it would be real. When we returned to Unit 419, the colony looked different. Not cleaner, not prettier, just honest. The holographic koi fish were still there, drifting lazily above the sidewalks. But now they looked like decoration instead of distraction. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Not with terror, but curiosity. Some even stepped outside. A few nodded at Selena. Not worship, not fear, recognition. I stood in front of my steel door and stared at it for a long time. The door that wasn't mine. The door that had been a lock. A relay. A hidden leash. Kaido arrived 2 days later with tools and a grin. "Time for renovations," he said. He ripped the steel frame out like it was rotten wood. Behind it, embedded into the wall, was the real mechanism. Etched circuits, resonance coils, a transmitter node that had been feeding off Selena's biology like a parasite. Cade helped disconnect it. Sable watched, arms crossed, eyes burning with quiet hatred. Selena stood beside me, silent. When the last cable was cut, the node died with a soft whine, like a creature exhaling its final breath. Kaido installed a new door, a normal door, thin, civilian, almost laughably ordinary. And when it clicked shut, the sound was different. Not a seal, not a vault, just a home. That night, no one stood outside my porch. No formation, no ritual, no forced guarding. Selena sat with me on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched. No sparks, no pain, just warmth. She looked at me, violet eyes soft. "The quiet feels strange," she whispered. I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "It's not trying to control us anymore." Outside, Echoil was still quiet. But now it was the right kind of quiet. The kind that happens when a place finally stops holding its breath and starts living again.